What's going on? What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, Shannon Smith, and this is the Successes Within Reach podcast, episode 5. Lift every voice. Why your vote really matters. Got a super dope episode for you today. I have a guest here that I'm going to bring up shortly, Mr. Emile Washington. He is. All right, Mr. Washington, how you doing this evening, sir?
Good, and yourself? Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that, and I appreciate you for joining me. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that you can join in the conversation and submit your questions and comments at www.facebook.com/SIWR podcast. One more time, www.facebook.com/SIWR podcast. All right, for a little background on Mr. Washington, he's a senior advisor to the Woke Vote organization. He's worked on Capitol Hill for members of the House of Representatives and the Senate. He's an Obama alum of the 2012 administration. And he's co-founder of Artists and Athletes United for Social Change, a nonprofit focused on enhancing policy for the entertainment community. All right, let's get started. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you choose a career in the political arena.
I'll start with the latter first. It really didn't. I didn't choose it. It just kind of happened, honestly. I grew up, and my dad's a pastor, so I grew up very active in the church, and our denomination is, shall we say, very politically savvy. Like, to even hold an office as a young person, you have to run, right? Like, you got to be nominated and elected. And so understanding from that landscape very early on just kind of fed into it and gave the bug. Then going to college, I got an internship with a mentor who was actually my mother's boss at the time, working for the governor, then Kathleen Blanco. And it opened truly the door and understanding, like, not only how laws actually work, but like the policy landscape. And from there, it just took off, right? Like, some of it just came really natural and easy, like even in school with, history and free enterprise and civics and all of those type of classes where I just could see it, causation, and so that's really how I got started. But a little bit about myself: originally from New Orleans, grew up there, in between there and Slidell, graduated in Slidell, went to LSU, which is our connection to, your fiance. So Lakia, thank you for thinking of me. And then from there, just kind of matriculated through. I worked in politics locally and state. So like I said, for the governor of Louisiana, I've worked for the Secretary of State in Arkansas, worked on campaigns in Arkansas, DC, Maryland, as well as the Obama campaign in 2012, and then elections in 2016, 18, and 2020. So have been in that space, and, from either working on the ground, helping with the field program, or consulting at the, the highest levels.
Nice. So I gotta ask you, with all of the craziness that just took place with this last election, what were your biggest takeaways?
Man, that's a hard one, right? Like, I think we're going to be studying this one for quite some time, just because, you had the most voters that have ever voted in a presidential election in the midst of a pandemic, right? Either you voted by literally going out there to risk your life at the polls, or you were able to safely vote from home. And to see how certain people will go out of their way to disenfranchise, right? Like, imagine if every time there was an election, you automatically received the ballot so that you could mail in, how high the actual voter turnout would be. And so, that right there, I think, speaks volumes to the way the system is set up. It's not meant for everybody to vote. That's just the reality of it. That's the facts of it, because the more people you get engaged, the less powerful smaller groups can be. And so seeing that really play out viciously, hopefully will awaken a lot of people. But, 9 times
Mhm.
out of 10, it won't.
So, and transitioning a little bit with what you were just talking about with the mail-in ballots, do you feel like more education was needed to let the voters know exactly how that process is going to go, or do you feel like the information was there and people just didn't take advantage of researching exactly what to do and then what was going to come afterwards? Because it seemed like there's a lot of confusion with them counting the mail-in ballots, and people didn't know, okay, was it counted, was it being thrown out, exactly what's going on.
Well, so you have some states that's all they do, right? Like they only do mail-in ballots. So what it is there was not enough information around the difference between a mail-in ballot versus an absentee ballot, right? And then
Hmm.
you also had provisional ballots. So there's all of those different things that's never really, or it's broken down, but people are not paying attention until it's too late to pay attention. Um,
Hmm.
the, but when you have massive numbers of people that send in, in some states, millions of votes via mail in, and it's not, computed like you do when you're actually going to a voting machine, by natural nature is going to take some time, right? Like, and so I think the issue more than anything was this expectation that we would have the results on election night with the understanding of there being so many no excuse absentee voting as well as mail-in voting, and having to actually manually physically put those ballots through the machines and then tabulate them. And I think that's where all around we did ourselves a disservice of not setting up proper expectations.
Gotcha. So both before this particular election, and I mean just throughout history period, there's been a problem. As you said, the system was not set up equally for everyone, and then you always have the issue of gerrymandering. But a lot of people, why I'm not sure, but they still haven't familiarized themselves with exactly what that process is and why it's so critical that people pay attention when it's occurring. So, can you just discuss the process of gerrymandering and why more people need to be aware when it occurs? And is there anything that can be done about it?
Well, before you get to gerrymandering, people have to understand why the census is so important, right? And so
Hmm.
what took place last year in actually filling out the census based off of where you were either moving or where you currently lived is how they're able to even do gerrymandering or do a space for redistricting, right? So like what happens with gerrymandering, every state is different. So some states, the state house has the power to allocate how the congressional districts are drawn up and how the state senate and the state house districts are drawn up. You don't do that for the senate because there's two senators for every state, so it doesn't matter what those districts look like. But that's based off the actual population of the state. And so as some
Hmm.
states get smaller, they lose, right? So like Louisiana, for instance, used to have 7 congressional districts. We lost a seat in I believe it was in 2010. And so we went from 7 to 6. And that was based off the population. And, some of that can be attributed to Hurricane Katrina and people not coming back after Hurricane Katrina. And so that,
Hmm.
by nature, people are not going to be there. And so for Louisiana, the way theirs works is the state house and the state senate, they draw up, they vote on it, and then the governor has to agree on it. In
Hmm.
states like, I believe, Arizona and California, there are independent review boards that are bipartisan, and like they're literally just drawing based off of people. It doesn't matter. They're not out there for whoever's in power getting to draw based off of what they want those districts to look like. And so those review boards have definitely hurt a lot of people, right? Like even in California, when theirs happened, which is a heavily Democratic state, you saw districts being lost from Democrats, and Democrats having to run against each other when they were combining districts because they were just drawing based off of where the general populace was in those areas,
Hmm.
and trying to get the 715 to 735,000 people that are required for the congressional district. So before you get to gerrymandering, you have to really pay attention to the census. The census not only has an impact on, who's going to represent you in Congress, but also how resources will be allocated, right? Like if it's showing that states are not as populated, then that means federal resources aren't, then that means budgets are changed. And so all of that plays a really, really important role in just your everyday life that people don't even pay attention to and don't realize.
Man, that's crazy. Like, just to think something as simple as filling out that form holds so much power, you know.
And they made it so easy last year. You can do it online, right? Like, I mean, it literally took me less than 5 minutes to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, you know, and it's not like people aren't aware. You see the commercials everywhere. You hear it on the radio. You see it, you know, all over your social media. It's literally everywhere. Saying just fill out this form. It has a whole lot of power. It, you know, it helps dictate this. It helps dictate that. But for some reason, people still don't pay attention to it. You know, not even realizing this is helping to shape your future.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of misinformation out there, right? Like there's people who are told, and it's intentional that they're being told in certain communities, you know, that you lose your benefits or whatever. Like none of that is tied to it, right? Like these are separate entities. They are not talking to each other. They're not saying, "Oh, we have this, so let's go to the IRS or go to DHS and say this is what this household." That's not how it works. And so we really have to do our due diligence, right? Like we have to be a little more proactive about things that impact our daily lives.
Yeah. So do you think the disconnect is more on the government stressing the importance and giving more information and making it more accessible, or do you think the disconnect is just surely on our side? You know, people just need to get it done and stop being lazy about it and realize the importance of it.
It's both, right? I think there's always a level of personal accountability that has to take place, right? Like you need to sit with yourself and figure out exactly how can you better, right? Like, and it's not even from the space of pull yourself up from the bootstraps, but understanding that, you know, these are things that impact me and I should just pay attention, right? Like people always are quick to say, I don't care about politics, not understanding like politics cares deeply about you, whether you want to or not, right? Like, and it may not be in a positive way. And then there is the flip side where like we shouldn't be talking about the census. If the census happens in April, we shouldn't be talking about the census in the previous October, right? Like there should be a proper lead up to it so people understand, so there can be, you know, dispelling of that. But depending on who's in power, right? Like a lot of this benefits them, right? Like when you're losing numbers, gaining numbers. And so all of that plays a huge factor.
Gotcha. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Successes Within Reach podcast, episode 5, Lift Every Voice While Your Vote Really Matters. I'm joined here with political consultant and strategist Emile Washington, and we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I'm ready to get the moment. All right, welcome back. All right, so this one here, I think is super important because a lot of people, I believe, are misinformed on the president can do this, the president can do that. Why doesn't he do this? Why doesn't he do that? And they don't understand the true balance of power between the president and Congress. So can you explain to us what is the true decision-making balance of power between the POTUS, the Senate, and the House of Representatives when it comes to making decisions, passing laws, so forth and so on?
Well, so it really depends on what we're talking about. So let's start with the budget. The president has no authority to dictate or pass a budget. That's not in his power. That is in the power of Congress. It's in the Constitution that the purse basically is in the hands of Congress. Now, what happens every year, the budget or the president, they are not able to, but they present a budget that they would like to see. And if their party is in power in the House or the Senate, then 9 times out of 10, a lot of those initiatives will fall into the actual budget. Now, prior to our most recent POTUS, you know, you would say that there was a good checks and balance, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? Like we have three, branches of government: the executive, the
Hmm.
legislative, and the judicial. And that's not only federal, that's state as well. So in your state, your governor will be your executive, and your state house and state senate will be your legislative, and the budget is done the exact same way there. And so when it comes to power, right, like the president does have unlimited access when it comes to executive orders. Now, again,
Hmm.
those executive orders still can't do the from the standpoint of like spending money. Now, there are certain loopholes when we're talking about the protection of the country, which is how he was able to take away some funds from the defense to start and allocate those to the wall by declaring an emergency there. And so it really depends on the subject as to who holds what power. But when you're thinking about any law that is ever on any book, it comes from the executive branch. It doesn't come, I mean, excuse me, it comes from the legislative branch. It doesn't come from
Okay.
the executive branch. Now, it may be in conjunction and come from ideas or, them speaking about this is what they want to have passed, but the president only signs it after the House and the Senate both agree and vote on it. Of course, they have veto power, so they can strike down any bill that comes across their desk. But the House has the power to override with 2/3 majority.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And like I said, I really wanted to hit on that because, regardless of who the president is in any given term, you see so many people get upset, and they're like, oh, they didn't do this. And they said they were going to do that. And then why didn't we get this? Why didn't we get that? And it's like a lot of this stuff is actually between Senate and the House. Like the president
Well,
can't
it's
just
it's
wave a
that,
magic
and like
wand.
we have to really be a little more conscious of how this all works, right? And then
Mhm.
just because one particular party is in power, they still represent everybody, right? Like, and so I was working on the Hill, and one of the a quote that I had heard one time is, "It's Congress' duty to ensure that actually bad laws don't get passed, not necessarily all the time that good
Mm.
laws get passed, right? They're supposed to be the last stop before we implement something that is detrimental to the country." And so,
Mhm.
while we may want something as a particular group of people, it may not be for the greater good of everyone, and vice versa. And so, uh, if whoever was in power or made their promises and they got everything, that's not a good equal sharing branch of government, and that's not healthy. You're beginning to have more of a dictatorship, and that's something we definitely want to steer very clear away from.
So it's funny you just said that because that kind of transitioned into my next question. Just how important is it to a party to have complete control? The POTUS, the Senate, and the House, and for the people, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Um, if we're gonna be completely honest, it's not a good thing. I think that there needs to be, uh, well, when you're not dealing with terrorists who hold things hostage, but when you
Mm.
actually have people who are fundamental in their space, right? Like people who it's there's nothing wrong with being fiscally conservative and understanding how the dollar works and being able to give and take so that we're not having such the massive deficits that we have, and we're only making it worse and worse for the future generations. Now there are times where of course it's extremely beneficial for certain people to have all parties, but I think the premise was never for one particular party to rule and be supreme. I think that you need to be able to be challenged and have enforced compromise, so that when that other party does get in power, their foot is not on the necks of everybody else. So if we truly believe in democracy, right, like and having a republic, then you need to have balance.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right.
I mean, that's
So
not an
this,
answer a lot of people want to hear, but that's just it.
hey, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. So this next question, well, not necessarily question, but discussion point. is something that is super, super important. And I feel like, especially to our community, because a lot of people skip over it. Can you explain why state and local elections are just as important as national and presidential elections?
They're not just as important, they're more important, right?
Okay.
Um, so the a law or a bill that's passed from at your local level will almost immediately go into effect, right? Like things that are happening at the national level have to go through so many layers. And most times, a lot of laws are attached to finance and budgets. And so there'll be something that is passed today, excuse me, but doesn't get implemented for another 3 years. That's
Hmm.
another administration. Somebody can then come in and flip that. But on the local level, right, when we're talking about especially laws that are impacting Black and brown communities and people of color, and especially if we're talking about from a criminal justice standpoint, or decriminalization and things of that nature locally, right? Like ensuring that we have people who are representing us as district attorneys and prosecutors, and
Hmm.
in some places you can elect your sheriff and your police chief and all of that, like, and then figuring out even on the school boards, ensuring that we can get police out of the schools and what type of curriculums and all of that. Like that is not happening at the national level, right? Like Betsy DeVos was not in integral parts of what was going on a local, right? Like, well, she wasn't
Yeah.
in mine. But so understanding the power that you have, because you're voting on these people way more often than you are from a
Hmm.
national standpoint, and you have access, right? Like you can go and see these people and talk to them directly and understand where the money is going and why it's being allocated here or there, and vote them out very quickly, galvanize,
Hmm.
understand, you know all politics is local. It's not just a cute phrase, it is real, right? Like understanding that my city council person lives next door to me, I need to talk to them and figure out what are we doing about whatever this particular issue is, versus your House of Representative member. They're splitting their time between DC and wherever you are. And the times that
Hmm.
they are there in the district, those are very curated experiences that are happening. And not that we need to disregard, the federal level, but the local, I think, is where we can see the drastic changes that implement the lives of everyone that we're around and that we care about.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I'm for the life of me can't understand why people skip their local elections, but then when it comes time to vote for the president, they're like, "Oh, I gotta go vote," and I'm like, "Are you serious? Like,
Well,
you have
a lot
to invest in what's going on around you."
Well, a lot of those local, they don't have the money to properly campaign, right? And so we're not pushing it, and so they don't see it. It's out of sight, out of mind. Every 4 years that this is going to happen around the presidential, and we're literally talking billions and billions, almost trillions of dollars that are put into this particular thing, and to some extent, like they want to keep you away from the local, not realizing how impactful the local is, so that they can push whatever their initiatives are and really keep their foots on your neck. And I just challenge people to pay a little more attention to what's going on literally down the street from you.
Hmm. So when you talked about the representatives splitting time between their particular jurisdiction in Washington D.C., what are some of the types of things that people need to be contacting their representatives about?
So almost everything, right? Like if you can't get it on in your city, then your representative they have a district office, right? Like in every area. So most of them have two or three offices depending on the size of their district. So if you're talking about like veteran affairs, if you need to get your passports, you can go through that. Like it's small things, right? Like you don't even think about. And
Hmm.
when you're talking about needing help with bills or whatever the case may be, or if there's something that you actually do want to see passed on the national level, you can contact your representatives or your senators. They're there for almost everything that is happening on a local level,
Hmm.
times two, right? But then they can also help you out on a local level and create spaces where you can have better dialogue with whoever it is on the local level, right? So like if you're having a problem, that's why you're a member of Congress there. It's not just to represent you in DC, but also at the local level. And they're 9 times out of 10 are going to have, access to whoever your mayor is, your governor. So any issue that you have, I would say start at your local level. And if they can't solve it, then that's where you escalate it. So just like when you're on phone with that cable company and you're asking to speak to a manager, that's your representative. You want to speak to them because they 9 times out of 10 will be able to get calls through and weed through a lot of red tape.
Gotcha. Great analogy. Somebody gonna catch that later on. I know it. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Successes Within Reach, episode 5. Lift every voice while your vote matters. We're about to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This break is brought to you by Breakthrough Kings. Welcome back. I'm your host, Shannon Smith, and I'm joined here with political strategist and campaign strategist, Emile Washington. So in the beginning, we talked about, some of the different organizations that you've been a part of, some of the campaigns that you've been a part of. You worked on Capitol Hill. How did you get involved in working on presidential senatorial campaigns, and what was it like working on Capitol Hill?
So for my first Senate race, I was living in Arkansas, and how did I get involved in that one? I wanted to go to DC, so I wanted to live in DC. I had got a taste of DC from a Howard homecoming, and I was like, yeah, I need to be in DC, and my godfather made some calls and got me on the campaign for, at the time, Senator Blanche Lincoln. It was a brutal campaign. It was a brutal loss. Like, it was one of those. She was an incumbent, but this was during the wave of the Tea Party in 2010, and she was literally the first election called. I mean, we had just finished like doing all of our canvassing. I was at home trying to take a shower so I can go to the watch party, and I'm walking in and get the call, oh, the race has been called. I'm like, bro, the polls just closed. Like, so that was not fun, but I think you need losses to learn. The presidential, I still to this date don't know how the Obama campaign got my resume. I have no idea who sent it over. I just got a call one day. I was working on the Hill, and they asked if I had time to do an interview, and I was just I was like, I'm at work. But I didn't know what was going on. And so that it was an opportunity that I had to take. Like, I went and talked to my chief of staff, and she was just like, absolutely, like this not even up for discussion. So that was, I got that call in I think February of 2012, and by March I was in Ohio. As for working on the Hill, after that 2010 loss, I still wanted to be in DC. So I moved to DC and lived with my cousin. So thank you, Crystal, for allowing me to be on your couch for 6 months. And she was just like, great, you can come. Had like literally no money. Moved to DC at the absolute worst time. It was in December. Had no idea the city shuts down. And it was like just ridiculous. So she was like, all right, here's my car. I'm going home for Christmas. So I was like, oh, okay. So I spent Christmas up there by myself. Came back. So like typically what happens after election, the Congress opens its new session in January. They do their swearing in. There's a lot of open houses and events and receptions and all of that stuff. And so, you just dress the part. So I would put on my suit,
Mm-hmm.
go up to the Hill, see friends, go to receptions. I think it was literally like that first week, probably like that Thursday. I was with some friends. They had a person who was looking for a staff assistant, which is an entry level position on the Hill. And I had two friends who literally on the spot just vouched for me. The next day,
Mm-hmm.
he did an interview with me. That following Monday, I interviewed with the chief of staff. By the end of the week, I had a job. So it was like
Oh wow.
truly right place, right time. And I think it was actually the perfect office for me to be into because there was a lot of learning. I worked
Mm-hmm.
for John Barrow, who represented Georgia in a truly swing district. So like his votes were not just straight Democratic. He had to vote in some things and co-sponsor and work across the line because his district truly represented, both parties. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so understanding how, to really work with the across the aisle gave me a better sense of, how this all is supposed to work, right? Like in the best situation. And they were a coalition of blue dogs and they got voted out. Like the people weren't, we were moving more and more into a very partisan chapter in our politics. And so that didn't fare well for people who were Democratic or but still were fiscally conservative or things of that nature.
Man, like talk about blessed and highly favored, man.
Like I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
Oh man. So like what is the time allocation for like Capitol Hill? Are you putting in 8 hour days, 10 hour days, 12 hour days?
If we're in session, there, technically the office is open from 9 to 5. And so the
Mm,
phones go on at 9, the phones go off at 5. But if there's votes, there's events after, right? Like you can go home, right? Let me say this. You can definitely go home
mm,
when your time is up. When 5 o'clock hits, if you got to leave, you can leave. If you want to advance, then part of it is that second job, right? Like being in a
mm,
position to staff the member at receptions and events, going to events and figuring out what are some of the organizations, the Tri Caucus or the Congressional Black Caucus or whatever the case may be, are and understanding and meeting. Like 9 times out of 10, your next job might not come in the office that you work with. It's going to come in another space, and people need to know that you exist. And you
gotcha.
can't necessarily get that sitting at your desk all day. So you have to be able to navigate. Also, quiet as it's kept, Capitol Hill don't pay you no money. So the receptions is where you get your dinner, right? So like you when you need to eat, you figuring out like, if you're an intern or a staff assistant, I won't disclose what those rates are. You're balancing how you pay your rent, your bills, and eating based off of the reception schedule for the week.
Oh
And
wow.
you can actually get, if you do it right, you can get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Well, you used to. I don't know what the Hill is like these days, but
Mm.
from different briefings or receptions or whatever the case may be, you can eat good. You can eat good.
Oh man, gotta be strategic.
You gotta be. Listen, it's there. It's there. It's up to you to take advantage of it, right?
Oh man, that's wild. So, next question I want to ask you is: how does one get involved with volunteering, either for campaigns or for organizations that register voters? And what are some good resources for those interested in getting connected?
I would always say really start locally, right? Like figuring out what are the issues and not necessarily the campaigns or the candidates that intrigue you, right? Because candidates will always let you down, whether that's being human or whether that's by losing, right? And so
Mm,
figure out what issues really, excuse me, interest you, and then seeing on the local level who are doing those issues, right? Like, of course, there's the overarching umbrellas of like the major legacy organizations, but there are small organizations in your cities, in your communities that are doing this and could use the extra volunteer hours just to figure out ways to advocate. And then there are larger that I work with or do things with, such as Woke Vote, When We All Vote, which is Michelle Obama's organization, Black Voter Matter Project, Black Male Voter Project, excuse me, and then Black Voters Matter. And all of those entities were very instrumental in what took place in Georgia. All of those are nonprofits, and they have action funds, which is a C4, and allow them to do advocacy. They also all register voters. So there's never an opportunity for you not to register voters, right? Like you can go out on your own and register voters if you feel so inclined, right? Like just figure out what is the rules with your Secretary of State or your local Board of Elections. You can go pick up your clipboard, get you some voter registration forms, and register voters anytime, right? It doesn't have to be prior to an election. But I stress more than anything, figure out what issues, like what are the things that you genuinely care about, that you want to see changes, because those never change, right? Like your
Hmm.
impact that you have on those issues will go further than any candidate that you believe in. And not saying that you shouldn't work for any candidates, right? So from the candidate side, when it's time for election, do your research. Don't just look on whoever is flashy, right? Like actually go on their websites, read what they're about. Check out their social media and figure out, do these particular people stand for? And every one of them will have, after their donate button, they'll have a volunteer button on their website. That's just they will have a volunteer button,
Yeah.
but they want that donate button first. And you can, volunteer, and 9 times out of 10, those volunteers will be registering voters. They will be doing phone banking. When we are safe to canvass, they will be canvassing again. We're now in the age of doing text banking. So all of those are things that you can do, and many from the comfort of your homes, and still be very impactful.
Nice. So, you just mentioned what just took place in Georgia. So, talk a little bit about what that experience was like, because it was a lot of emphasis put on Georgia towards the end of the election, and the efforts of Stacey Abrams and all of the organizations that were boots on the ground and getting people registered and then getting people out to vote for a second time. So, share with us a little bit what that experience was like.
Well, what people don't talk about is Georgia has been ripe for this for quite some time. Georgia is not, or has not been, as red as they make it out to be. So this was not a anomaly by any stretch of the imagination. This was a
Okay.
situation where organizations finally got funding to fully do their programming without somebody telling them how to talk to their voters, right? Like the new coin and phrase that they use now is relational organizing, which is what we've done for years. We just lacked resources, and that's really finding your local person and talking to them and engaging them, and then paying them to go out and talk to their people, right? Stacey Abrams and the NSAs of the world, and Ashley Robinson's, and there's so many others that I can name. They've been doing this work and building out this infrastructure for years, right? Like it
Mhm.
wasn't something that just happened overnight. And that can literally happen in any state, right? Like we talk about these swing states of Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I don't even know why we talk about Iowa, but they matter because we said that they matter. And so because we say they matter, people funnel all of this money. If we say that the South matters and we put the money into it, the infrastructure will be there to be able to stand it up, but you have to allow people to talk in a very natural and organic space. What it was like, it was hell, man. I mean, you know, we were, we literally were risking our lives out there, right? Like COVID is real, right? Like, and
Mhm.
a lot of people would see our videos and be like, we're not, I'm like, yes, we may not have our mask on at this time, but understand we are getting tested on a weekly basis because it's imperative, right? But it had to be done. And it was also very challenging because we just had a race, and so you had to explain to people why they needed to vote again. But Georgia was, the vibe that we got. People knew. People knew what was at stake. They knew why this matters, and our people knew, and which is why you saw, like, when you look at the raw numbers, you saw Raphael Warnock get more votes than John Ossoff, which was, the candidate that they thought was going to be the one to carry, and it flipped, and it was like our community showed up. They knew, and voting has always been very instrumental in our community. It's just when you don't feel compelled to vote for someone, that's a real thing, and we need to acknowledge that a lot of these candidates don't represent the interests, nor do they look like the people that they're trying to represent. And you can't just expect somebody to vote for you because of the letter that's behind your name.
Facts. I mean, that's a great point. Great point. A lot of us from the outside looking in, I think there was a real fear when we realized that they had to do this a second time. People were like, all right, you got a lot of people that mailed theirs in, but then, like you said, there's a lot of people that risk their lives just going to vote, standing in these lines for minutes or hours for some, just depending on their polling location. So it's like, are people really going to take this risk and roll the dice and do it a second time around? So, to see the media coverage and the people on social media as well, like, look, Georgia, whatever we need to do, like, we need y'all to get your mask on and go out here one more time and do this. Like, it was something to see, man. It was something to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it was definitely an experience, and it's easy to duplicate when the resources are there and you get out of people's way, right?
And just want to say again, like, can't thank you enough, and those that were out there with you. The work that you all did is absolutely incredible. Like you said, a lot of you all put your own lives and health at risk, to make sure that this thing got done. So salute to all of you all, man. It was absolutely awesome.
Well, thank you.
All right. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you, share with our audience what's next for you this year, and also how they can get in contact with you for resources or to join or donate to organizations that you partner with.
What's next? I'm trying to figure that out. I haven't had a chance to actually breathe to figure it out. We're trying to, and I still will be doing some work with Woke Vote. I have a few passion projects that I'm not ready to share just yet. I'll be doing some work with Until Freedom as well, which is Tamika Mallory's organization. And so I'm just really trying to see what's the best landscape, and take a break. Like, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. So we're looking to see how we can actively stay engaged. Thank you, Selena, and Kia. I'm easy to reach. My Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is just my name. I was able to scoop those up real easy, so I don't have to change anything. And as far as the organizations, right? Like, you can follow or look up Woke Vote. You can look up Black Voters Matter, When We All Vote, Black Male Voter Project. All of those are great organizations to start with, and just doing research and figuring out things that they do on a day-in basis. And I stress that these are not organizations that operate only in election time. Like, they're year round. Because it takes. There's a lot that we're trying to fight against, and you can't just do that one time a year or every other year. And it's not just about electing people. We got to train. We got to build benches. We got to ensure that people understand why they vote matters. And the voice that they actually do have in all of this.
Gotcha. So, last word in one sentence. What would you tell people why their vote matters?
Because people don't want you to vote.
And that says it all. And that says it all. Oh, man. All right. As we wrap up, I want to hit you all with this week's Mind Shift moment. Challenges are what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. It may sound cliche, but truly, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. Hang in there, stay focused. You have what it takes. There's always an answer, always another way to find a solution, a route a route that you may not want to take, but it'll get you through until tomorrow. Don't give in, don't give up. Don't you throw in the towel. Each test is only adding to your testimony. Your breakthrough is coming. Just keep going. And that is this week's Mind Shift Moment. I want to thank you again for joining me this evening on the podcast, sir, for taking some time out, answering these questions, dropping these gems. Hopefully everyone, learned something this evening and something that they can share, in their political knowledge, as well as learning some resources, to go and reach out to help make change in their communities and the world around them. One more time, I want to put these up on the screen. Woke Vote, www.wokevote.us. When We All Vote is www.whenweallvote.org. Black Voters Matter is www.blackvotersmatterfund.org. And Black Male Voter Project is www.blackmalevoterproject.org. And one more time, this is the Success is Within Reach, episode 5, Lift Every Voice, Why Your Vote Really Matters. We thank you all for joining us this evening, and we remind you that you were not designed to be good, you were designed to be great. And with that, I will see you next Thursday.